Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the show. My guest today is Ben Tuff. He has a documentary coming out very soon in the coming weeks. We'll say springtime of 2023. Swim Tuff, how I swam my way out of the bottle. He's my guest today. Ben, how are you?
I am excellent. I'm ready for this Vermont weather to get a little warmer, so
Oh,
I can get in the open water again. But
yes.
other than that, enjoying the sunshine and excited for new things to come.
Fantastic. Love the attitude, love the energy. So Vermont, yeah, you are, isn't it like Peru? Like you're in Peru, Vermont? Who would
Yeah,
have known
very
there's a
small town.
interesting, like where are we talking population wise?
Oh, maybe just over 1,000 or so.
Okay. Yeah, that's and okay. So born and raised there or
No, I was
oh,
like I was like quite itinerant. I was all over the place.
nice.
Ohio, Toronto, Boston,
Oh,
Atlanta. We moved around quite a bit, but
yeah.
um, I went to college up in Maine at Colby College, and I have stayed in the Northeast ever since.
Gotcha. Excellent. So Toronto, I'm from Edmonton, Canada. So yeah, I
Right.
spent a little bit of time in Canada yourself there. How long were you in Toronto for?
So our family was there for quite a long time.
Oh,
Both my parents went to Dalhousie,
mhm.
and my mom grew up in Corner Brook, Newfoundland,
Very cool.
and so we have our roots in Canada. At least
Yeah.
half of our family does, and I think our family was in Toronto, not quite Toronto. We were in Mississauga for
Mm.
about 11 or 12 years.
Oh, okay. So a good stint. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Excellent. Very cool to hear. So yeah, let's you know what, I like to do the format of like I want to hear what's going on with you present. There's a big we're helping create and maintain and sustain the buzz about this documentary. Sounds like you're doing a little uh, perhaps not little, I don't mean to sound dismissive, a tour essentially before this gets entered into like film festivals and such. Let's talk a little bit about it. It's a very interesting documentary. I will of course include the trailer for the YouTube trailer and such. So yeah, tell me a little bit about it. Like how exciting is this for you? How long was the process? So much to unpack. And we'll start with, yeah, the documentary, please.
Yeah, so I was a an educator my whole life from the day I graduated up until about what 2 months ago.
Oh,
I uh,
wow.
I worked at boarding schools, and I worked at junior boarding schools in particular, which is the younger kids, grades 5 through 7, well 5 through 9. And I worked mostly with the 5 through 7 age group. Um, but we finally moved to Vermont this past year to kind of settle down, and I was working at a ski academy here, and I was working on the movie kind of as on the side and doing what I could. And this started about a year and a half ago. Matt Corliss, who is our producer, he came to me just kind of out of the blue after having a conversation with my identical twin brother, and he called me up and said, "Hey Ben, like I heard about these crazy swims that you do. Like it sounds like I want to document this. I want a piece of this. I want to figure it out, what makes you tick and how you
Mm,
do these crazy things." And I was like, "Let's do it." I think that it might be a little boring having a movie just about me, uh, but but if you think we could do it, then I'm all for it. And he said, if you can keep that attitude, then this is going to be the best documentary I've ever made. So that was a year and a half ago, and I knew that I was getting ready to do a really big swim this past summer, which was from Providence, Rhode Island, all the way down Narragansett Bay, about 25 miles to Jamestown, Rhode Island. And no one's ever swum that before in one fell swoop. I think a couple people have done it in like 6 or 7 segments. But I said,
wow.
screw it, I'm doing it. I'm going to do it all. And as Matt started to spend more time with me here in Vermont, he'd fly out from Boulder and film and do some of the B reel and do some interviews with me. He started to learn a lot more about my story. and my story of recovery, and essentially my story of survival. And he said very quickly, or not soon after we started the documentary, he said, "This isn't a story about swimming. This is a story about recovery." And every single person on this planet should be able to relate to this. And you can send such an amazing message to everyone who gets to view this film. And I was like, sweet, like, I like to hear that. All I have to do is swim 25 miles and be me. And that's what I did. And it wasn't easy. It was a very windy day and had some serious currents against me. It took me about 15 hours, and I'm not a swimmer either. You know, I learned how to swim right after I got sober. And so this isn't something that comes naturally to me. And I'm probably a pretty ugly swimmer. If anybody who knows technique, I've improved. Yeah. And I can put a lot of time in the pool, and I can fake it to make it a little bit. But in the end, it was a matter of willpower and the ability for me to push through these barriers. And as Matt was alongside, it kind of forced me, even though I made this kind of camera disappear, sometimes he'd ask me these very poignant questions that made me think, wow, you know what? I don't necessarily do this for anyone other than me, because this is what keeps me sober. This is what keeps me centered. And this is what reminds me what it's like to persevere and to push through the toughest times of your life. And by far the hardest thing I ever dealt with in my 42 years was 11 years ago, when I made that choice of sobriety, and I pushed through that wall, and I said, okay, I'm done with this. I'm done with addiction. And now I'm that newborn baby ready to go. And for some reason, not only does swimming allow me to remind myself how difficult it is to go through these times, and how difficult an adventure like that can be, but it also reminds me to surround myself by around positive people. And those that's my core group. I don't have many friends, but the friends that I have are my true friends. They know everything about me. They show up no matter what, and I would show up for them no matter what. And that's a large part of the message of the documentary as well. And the time that I spend preparing for swims, which is a lot, you know, it gets to 24 hours a week at least in the water. And then 2 weeks before, probably close to 35 hours in the water. And I've learned to treasure that time. And to me, that time is just me. It's just me alone in my thoughts, connecting with my higher power, connecting with this idea of mindfulness and a connection with nature or the surrounding water. And it also allows me that time to process. And that's where I do all my thinking. That's where I do all my big decision-making moments. And without it, I'd be pretty lost, I think.
Yeah, so interesting. I love all of that. You know, there's like, as soon as you started into about just the whole swim, the documentary, I mean, there's like several hours worth of podcasting that we can do. So we'll try and you know, I really want to get into your origin story too. So much interesting topics that we want to branch off into. I do want to have a couple curiosity based questions about the swim itself. So 15 hours. Does that include like intermittent breaks, like where you're just kind of floating there? Certainly you have to eat and replenish. I believe it said on the trailer that, you know, there was, I imagine it's one of the members of your team mentioning that if you drop 2% of your weight, then your 10% of your cognitive skills go out the window. So I imagine there's like this fairly regimented types of, I don't know, stops or breaks that you take. Am I off base by suggesting that?
Yeah, so I would take a break about every 30 to 35 minutes and replenish as much calories and liquids as possible. To put it into comparison, I burned about 9,000 calories. I had a scientific team kind of alongside me because they were using me as a scientific experiment of what it's like to go that far of a distance in the water. So they were taking all my vitals, everything. And I even swallowed a little pill that took instant reads of my internal temperature and sent it back to the boat. And so I burned about 9,000 calories. I managed to put in, about 5,500 calories.
Interesting. Yeah.
And about 12 liters of liquids, which is a lot.
Oh, yeah, sure is.
I was fully hydrated by the end of it, and I still lost 12 pounds.
Wow.
From beginning to end. And so that was all muscle burn pretty much, or fat burn. I don't really have that much fat, so it was probably more muscle burn than fat burn. It's those kind of things that you're like, wow, that's kind of cool,
Right? So interesting. I love how the documentary took a different spin of it too. And it's interesting that you have somebody approach you, and just go, hey, like I hear you do these swims. And then as the production and as you guys get to know each other a little more, and then a little bit more of your backstory and such gets revealed, it's like there's a lot more layers to this, right? There's a lot more of a bigger story arc, if you will, like when you integrate the recovery story, and then all of a sudden it, as you mentioned, can touch anybody that watches it at that point. All of a sudden it's got this massive ability to connect with people, right?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. So cool. So cool. I think that's a great time to just go back in time. By the way, congratulations on 11 plus years of sobriety. It's amazing. Always very inspiring to have somebody with that kind of story. So let's go back even further though. Like if you, as far as you care to go back, Ben, and just like origin story with this addiction that you had, or if you care to describe it as an addiction, whatever verbiage you use, your relationship with alcohol. Just take us back and walk us into that, what changed for you before you decided to take that life altering step of sobriety.
Yeah, I always, because I'm one of those alcoholics and addicts who I am very, very open about who I am, what I've been through, because in my mind, if there aren't people like me, who do people have to talk to and go to when these things come up? And that's why I'm trying to, some people are like, you're like the happiest alcoholic I know. And I was like, yeah, like I am, because I want to show people that it's actually an amazing thing that you can learn about yourself through a very trying time by having this disease. And that is kind of opposite of everything that I was brought up to believe in. And I was brought up in a very conservative family, and we were 6 kids. I was the youngest of 6. My oldest brother is 10 years older than me, and he started kind of partying hard and like when he was 12 years old. And I think that just in general, our family has always been kind of like the cocktail family, and very traditional in, you know, its Newfoundland roots, and in its roots back in England with my dad's side of the family. And so even though I avoided alcohol for a while, when I decided age 16, 17 that it was time to give it a try, it was like all in. You know, it was like, okay, I'm going to be partying every weekend. And, you know, every single one of my weekends revolved around. And, you know, that's what high school is. You know, who's gonna be in charge of it all. And it was a lot. And I got to college, and then college was kind of tame for me. You know, the weekends were fine, but I did find, I went to Colby College, and you know, people worked hard there. It wasn't like my twin brother who went to Vanderbilt, and it was a crazy party and frat houses and all of that.
Yeah.
So I behaved myself, but I did do a good job of finding people who are out partying every single night of the week, if necessary. And for me, it was good because I got to know a lot of different people. You know, I could hang out with the football players after their game on Sunday nights. I could, you know, party with the kind of hippies on Mondays and Tuesdays. On Wednesdays, I would hang out with, you know, the ski team. And it just was kind of a revolving circle. And it was just a piece of my existence. You know, the other piece that was going on throughout my life is I've always had very high anxiety, and I was a huge hypochondriac. I was worried about my health. I'd have, you know, heart palpitations. And, you know, I look back at when I was 13, my mom was having a panic attack and came down to the kitchen, and she's like, "What's wrong?" And I said, "I think I'm having a heart attack." She's not, "You're not having a heart attack." She went into the other room and she got a shot of vodka. She put it on the table, and she was like, "That's going to help. Just take that and go to bed." Like, oh, okay. So the seeds were planted. You know, I'm not saying that that's where my alcoholism came from.
Sure.
But it's definitely in the genetic lines of my family. And, you know, I was pretty under control for my first 8 or 9 years of teaching. But then it came like, as I got more stressed, and as my anxiety levels started to go up, it was no longer like a Friday, Saturday, Sunday event anymore. And it was more like Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And I could find young faculty members who were ready to throw back any night of the week, no matter what. And then it became, here I am, like, what am I doing? And this is about 14 years ago. And I started the pattern of going to the liquor store, getting a half pint of vodka, getting 2 vitamin waters, sipping the vitamin waters down just below the label, filling them both up, throwing the vodka bottle away, sealing them up, putting in my backpack, and then I'm good for 2 nights. And then I would chug those down on the way back. And then I would, you know, drink a couple beers to kind of mask it off. And that was a very quick decline in my ability to keep it together. And my addiction was in full effect. And it wasn't until it got to the point where I had my like 3rd anxiety attack, and I ended up going to the hospital, and I was in the waiting room of the hospital, and they put me in like the triage room where they like do all the tests and get you ready to go to the next step. And I was in the triage room for like 3 hours, and I say to the nurse, I'm like, "Just get me in there and give me like the shot of Ativan, like get me figured out." And she said, we'll do that. as soon as your blood alcohol is down below the legal limit.
Right.
So this is like 11:30 the next morning. I'd stopped
Mm.
drinking at like 9 the night before.
Mm.
My wife's sitting there and I've been hiding it from her the whole time. My lies, everything, it's all out. And she knew something was going on for a while. But I was a pro at hiding it. And I think that there, to a certain extent, a lot of us just, we don't want it to be true so much that we don't want to see it. And I was just kind of as crazy as I could be and reckless. And once that happened, it was all over. And she said to me, "What are you going to do? What's your plan now?" I said, "I'm going to rehab. I'm done, ready to go. We got this. Don't worry. I got it. I'm done. I'm not going to do this anymore." And, and then I was like, you're going to lose your family. You're going to lose me. You're going to lose your kids. And I said, "I know. Don't worry about it. I got it. Like, this is it. I've got my head set on it, and let's go." And that's what I did. I went to rehab for 5 weeks. And I was definitely the happiest person at the rehab center. And I loved every second of it. I was like, this is so awesome. I'm working on me. I'm getting caught up in all these crazy things that I never knew about myself. I never knew I was bipolar. I never knew that this anxiety was coming from a much deeper and darker place in my brain.
Yeah.
And also learning some of my coping mechanisms and learning some of my weaknesses and how to recognize those weaknesses. I'm like, oh my gosh. And I came out of rehab and I said, every single person on this planet should have the opportunity to go to a rehab and work on themselves in this way.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, when I was young, like, anybody that I knew was who had gone to a rehab in our family was like this black sheep, horrible person who was addicted to something.
Yeah. So dirty, right? The scarlet letter in a sense. Yeah. That's such an interesting take on it. I love the idea is like everybody should have the opportunity to, right? Because it's like, there is the people that are forced into rehab, and I wonder, what percentage of success they are versus somebody that's like, hey, no, like you put your hand up and you willingly went, and your experience being so much different as a result, right? So yeah, interesting stuff. Great story. Thank you for sharing that. I loved like the specificity that you gave as far as like the drinking story. That really jumps out to me too, right? Like the whole, and like the visual like really helps the story stick of you like draining or drinking the vitamin waters right to the label level. I'm like, yeah, so that's I love the detail. So thanks for sharing that, man. Yeah. So next stage, you got out of rehab. What was it like navigating that first year? That's so interesting. I have a lot of people that listen that are sober curious or in that first 30 days, first 70 days, first year. So what was it like for you? What was like your big challenges in that first year, if anything?
Well, I think that for me, I came out like a newborn, and it had been so long since I felt for the first time. Everything had been numbed by alcohol for so long that, it was always an excuse, like, oh, I had an awful day, I'm going to have a couple beers, or, oh, or even better, like, oh, I'm at the beach, this is amazing, sun's out, let's party, let's go. I always had an excuse for drinking, no matter what. And because of that, I was never able to appreciate or work through any of the issues that I had. So suddenly here I am, and, little things like, my child not wanting to go to bed on time. What do I do? Like, how do I react to that? Like, how do I calm her? Or how do I don't know how, I don't have the coping mechanisms anymore because they were never there.
Right.
And they were so dulled with alcohol. I had to relearn everything. And
Mhm.
I kind of compare it to someone who has like a really bad back injury and they have to learn how to walk and,
Yeah.
do all these things all over again. And that's how I felt. And because of it, it was like I was hyper aware
Mm,
and I
mhm,
was just taking everything in. I wasn't
mhm.
that outgoing, like crazy Ben that everyone knew. And I think everyone thought that I turned into a zombie. And but because I spent so much time just like taking everything in and processing and figuring out what the hell's going on.
Mm.
And I would say that I did my 90 and 90, and that was awesome. And then once the school year started, I realized, you know what? I don't really belong with these grown-ups. I
Mm.
belong with kids.
Oh,
That's who I connect best with because they don't judge me.
yeah. That's so that's a very cool realization. So that's when you're getting into yeah, like the junior boarding schools, as you mentioned. When did swimming come into it? Like, I get the impression that swimming, and I love the idea of like this moving meditation. You say there's a lot of like byproducts that you get from swimming that folks get from being still, right? And being in a meditative state that you're getting from actual like moving meditation. So I liken that to like I've, had moments like that in from yoga. Um, but yeah, I'm just curious as to when did swimming show up for you? And you mentioned earlier in the interview that it hasn't come natural to you. In fact, you had to learn how to swim during your sobriety recovery. So when did that show up for you in your life?
So my first sponsor in rehab came to me by chance, and I heard him talk, and he was talking about triathlon. He had an Irish accent. His name's Ken, and I was like, dude, this guy's the bomb. Like he does these triathlons. He's like such a badass. And someone in my house that I was living in said, when you go to these meetings, you have to find your sponsor. Just find like the hardest one there that's going to really get you through the steps, hold you accountable, and do everything. And I was like, this is the dude. So I went up to him and I said, Ken, will you be my sponsor? And he was like, yeah, I'll be your sponsor. And I was like, do you think I can learn how to swim? And he was like, yeah, you can learn how to swim, Ben, no problem. I learned how to swim. So it was right after my time in rehab that I jumped into the pool, and little by little I started with half a length and then a full length and then 2 lengths and then 4 lengths. And finally I got to the point where I was up to like half a mile, and I said, okay, let's do it. I'm 3 months into my sobriety, and this is a great way to celebrate it by doing my first triathlon.
Hmm.
And it was just like a sprint triathlon, and I did it, and it was awesome. And I was into triathlon really competitively for about 7 years. But then I found that it was getting too competitive for me. And
Mm,
I just
mhm.
wanted to win. I wanted to beat everybody. So I'd like be at the start line and I'd be looking at people's calves to see what age group they were in. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna get him.
Yeah.
No way, he's not fast. I'm definitely gonna get him at the beginning, or I'm gonna get him on the bike. Um, so when that happened, I said, okay, you got to remember why you're doing this.
Mm, mhm.
And I said, even though I hated swimming to begin with, it's what I enjoy most.
Hmm.
And I said, I'm going to try and do that 2 mile swim from Newport, Rhode Island to Jamestown, Rhode Island. And I did it that summer, and it wasn't that bad. And
Mm.
so the night I got back, I went home and I signed up for the race around Key West, which is a 12.5 mile race all the
Wow.
way around Key West. And Ken was great because he told me early on, he said, if you ever want to push yourself, if you ever think you might want to do something, just sign up for it
Hmm.
because the rest will fall into place.
Interesting.
And that's been very true. And when I've done these long swims, I did a swim around the island that I live on in Jamestown, which is 20 miles. And then I was the first person to swim from Block Island to Jamestown which is some of the sharkiest waters in all of New England, and completed that swim, and then Providence to Jamestown. So it was a as quick as I went down, my addiction was as quick as I went up with my swimming.
Right. I guess then to circle back to again to the what swimming does for you on a mental level, because you know, you hear in like rooms of recovery, don't rush into another addiction because then you're just going to bypass the reason that you had the addiction in the first place, which I totally get. Whereas you, you know, replaced it with essentially a new addiction that's, you know, has a much better value for your body, for example, than slamming vodka and beers. And you're also finding that there's this mental benefit. And like you mentioned, you're processing things, you're doing your deep thoughts, you're learning more about yourself, learning more about like what you're capable of and such, right? So interesting byproduct that I imagine turned into arguably the most important part of this of swimming. Is that, am I correct in assuming that?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
100%. And I'm very unconventional in my swimming. You know, I'm always listening to music.
Okay.
And people think that that's like, how can you be one with the ocean if you're listening to music? And I'm like, whatever. Like,
Yeah.
I'm listening to reggae music
Yeah.
all the time, 15 hours straight. They're like, you listen to reggae music for 15 hours? I was like, yeah. And I could have kept going, listening to that music for another 15, and it never would have gotten old for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, it's all really positive for me. And whatever it takes, I'm going to do it.
Yeah. That's the thing about like unconventional too. And it's the people that I imagine are, yeah, I mean, I don't need to get too far into this, but the people that are, you know, projecting or envious of something that you're able to do. So they're going to like start nitpicking at the way that you do something, right? Like you mentioned, like my technique isn't necessary. And like, you're listening to music, you're supposed to be one with the ocean, you know, these like
Right.
supposed to's and shoulds come up, right? Which is interesting. No, I love that, man. So yeah. And then a little bit, I just wanted to go back to, because it was an interesting comment where you're saying it was like this feeling of a newborn. And then that's when you realized that you wanted to be more with kids. And I just sort of glazed over it because I saw it as a transition into the swimming part. But I want to go back to that. So what was it? What did you feel like relatable to the fact that they are at a stage where they're taking it all in? So you felt it was a way for you to remain present on that same kind of level? Or like, what do you mean exactly by that you wanted to work with kids at that stage in your life?
Well, for me, my students have always seen me for who I am.
Mm.
And because of the trust and of how I look at them, in return, they will look at me in that same way. And that's without judgment.
Ah, yes.
So very quickly, I went from an anonymous addict after 1 year to being a very proud, outspoken addict with my students. They all knew who I was. Why? Because, and this went against what the school wanted me to do. They were like, you can't do that. You can't do that. And I said, I can do whatever I want. You know, this is going to help them relate to me and relate to others who go through these same things. And if I can help them in that journey, when it comes, and it will, whether it's themselves or someone else, they are going to come across this. If my presence and the way that I carry myself, if that can help them, then let's do it.
Yeah. That's so cool. I imagine the schools that you had worked with changed their tune after seeing the effect that it had, or was there a spot where they retracted that initial hesitation?
No, yes, they did. Especially as like, you know, so many of my students had either brothers and sisters or parents with some sort of chemical dependency.
Yeah.
And there was one point that I was taking like 5 or 6 students to Al-Anon meetings or Alateen
Oh,
meetings.
wow.
And and everyone's, the administration, and I was part of the administration, they're like, wow, like this is really good for them.
Mhm.
Like they can connect with other kids that are going through exactly what they're going through. And I said, well, yeah, that's why I'm doing this,
Right. Right. Yeah. That's cool stuff, man. Glad we want to circle back to that. All right. So now here we are. It's a time of recording. It's like the first or second day of spring. So, it's and you're bringing this documentary to the world. So tell us a little bit about, what's in the future plans here. So you do have a tour. You're doing a podcast tour right now. Really happy to have you on today. Yeah, tell us about what's are you fancying yourself? You're going to be a bit of a celebrity here. You got some red carpet ready to go. What's going on? Tell us about like the film festivals and everything else that you have, like your tour that's upcoming here.
Yeah, so it's really great because my producer's like the most laid back guy. Like he is total Colorado, and he did the film Free Solo, which was that climbing movie, and Social Dilemma.
Oh, okay.
He's done a couple big movies,
Yeah,
and they're all pretty kind of, they have a relaxed vibe to it, and
cool.
that's why I think we work well together. And I'm like, oh Matt, like where do you think I'm going to be going this spring? And he said, well, we'll see. You'll know a week out or so, and
Yeah,
and we'll hit up the festivals, that way. I'm like, that's good for me. You send me where you want me to go, and I'll go. And the nice thing is it's going to be a great opportunity for me to bring the movie alive in front of all these people who are trying to get a better understanding of what the goal of the movie is, and also getting in front of some of the execs from like the Netflixes and
yeah,
the HBOs and the Amazons, and hopefully get it sold or get a line of distribution out there so that the most people can see this in the end. So we're about 2 or 3 weeks away from it being totally done.
oh, wow.
And one of my main goals is I'm starting to line up speaking opportunities at schools. And
Mm, hmm.
my goal is to get into middle schools and high schools all
Hmm.
around the US,
Hmm.
and talk about my experience, and talk about my outlook, and talk about addiction, because I'm confident that I can help, starting with the kids. I can help them understand that, addicts aren't these terrible people,
Hmm.
and destigmatize that whole idea that has been following addiction around for the last couple hundred years.
Yeah, right. There's been such a like a progress that has been made in, from my perspective anyways, even in the last like 5 years, 5, 10 years, but specifically the last 5 years, there's just been such a rise in people, recovering out loud, they say, or normalizing it. And I mean, you can really see it in the Instagram sobriety community, how many people are in there and doing some great work and all that. Have you seen that as well? I mean, you have a unique view of it being 11 years in now. Have you found that it's been more open and accepting as you've gone through your journey, your specifically your recovery journey? Yeah, what is your take on that?
Well, it's hard because I'm kind of like the attractor magnet, and all the people who are kind of like hiding around the room, they
Mm,
come to me because they know that I am in recovery.
yeah,
And
okay.
so it's hard to tell whether that's a product of them being more comfortable with the whole idea in general,
Right.
or with them just being comfortable with the idea of me doing it myself.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. That makes sense. That's a good answer. Especially the way that you said, like, basically since day one, you've been an open book. Like you've
Right.
you've approached it like that. So I could see where that would be yeah, hard to, differentiate your own experience from what else is going on, especially, you know, from what you just said there. So awesome, dudes. Yeah, Swim Tough, how I swam my way out of the bottle. So that's coming soon. Dude, that'd be amazing. Like, so what is the you're kind of giving a little perspective behind the scenes, if you will. So this tour that you're doing with the film festivals and such, at that point, there is an opportunity that it gets picked up by like a Netflix or like a streaming distributor. Is that sort of how this type of thing works?
Yeah. So that's
Very
where
cool.
it kind of, the bids happen. Like
Oh,
after a lot of times, they'll wait in the back a little bit and see what awards are giving out and what have you. My story's a very unique story in the space that it's in documentary.
yeah.
So that helps me out big time, because it even though it's a story of addiction and sobriety, it's one that speaks to the masses, and yet at the same time, it's not like an intervention approach, which is a Debbie Downer, like
Right.
hit rock bottom. It's very much the product of making the decision to get sober and the amazing things you can do with it.
Yeah, that's right. And that's one of the first things that you said when we started this interview was like you wanted to be to show, you know, to debunk some of these myths that especially when I was using, you know, I'm like, oh, I'm gonna be so boring, you know, so life is so boring sober, right? It's these part of these justifications that that addiction pattern that natters in my head would definitely say to myself. So the fact that you're showing the exact opposite of that story, they're like, no, like I'm accomplishing some amazing things, I'm having a wonderful life, I'm having a great time doing it, yeah, I mean, that's such a rad story. And like you say, I mean, addiction does touch everybody in every family in some form, fashion or another. Seems like everybody I talk to, there's like, you know, whatever, alcoholism runs on my mom's or my dad's, one of the sides or both, you know what I mean? Like yeah, so it's such a common thing, dude. So yeah, you know, I really appreciate you coming on the show today, Ben, and best of luck to you in your in getting this the word out on this documentary. I'm looking forward to watching the full thing. You know, anybody that can hear this that hasn't watched the trailer, it will be in the show notes. Definitely look it up. It was a captivating trailer that got me very excited for it as well. So yeah, any final words from you, Ben, as far as you know, I always like to say, you know, if somebody is listening out there that's sort of on the fence, you know, that's sober curious, that it gets brought up a lot nowadays. Yeah, what would be like your parting advice to them if they're listening, and you know, what can you say about your own journey that would potentially sway them?
Yeah, so I'll bring up a recent story that I have, and about 1 month ago, I had one of my former parents come to me and say, "My son's got a problem. I don't know what to do. He failed out of college. He's smoking a lot of pot. He's drinking a lot." And I said, "Okay, you know, I'll talk to him." We had a great relationship when I was his teacher, and I talked to him every day for a month, and then I got a FaceTime call, and he was threatening to take his own life. He was threatening to hurt his dad. So I called the cops. I got the cops there. I got him to take him to the hospital. I drove down, met them at the hospital, and I said, he's got to stabilize, and let's deal with it. And, you know, let me deal with it. The dad didn't want to deal with it. Mom didn't want to deal with it. Recently divorced. And I said, okay, I got this. Okay, just trust me. And he got stabilized, and I said, "Are you," to the student, I said, are you ready to go to rehab?" He said, "Yep, 100%. Let's go." So I took him down to the same rehab that I went to,
Oh wow.
which he first got declined from, but
Yeah.
I kind of weaseled his way in there. And he called me today, 10 days in, crying, and he said, "Ben, I just want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart for saving my life, because this is the best thing that's ever happened to me." And I said, "Explain that, please." And he said, "I feel like the weight of the world has just been taken off of my shoulders, and I can live again."
Beautiful. It's a fantastic thing you did, and what feedback to hear back to you. I like how you said explain that. That's such a cool thing. And then to get that powerful affirmation out of them, dude, that's so cool. If somebody wants to reach out to you, what's the best way to get a hold of you? If you're Instagram, Facebook guy, what's the easiest way for somebody to reach out to you?
Yeah, either you can reach out to me at ben.tuff. That's my Instagram. Or you can always email me, bentuff@gmail.com.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for coming on the show today, Ben, and all the best of luck to you and your documentary and the team that's behind you.
Thank you so much for having me.